land of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hunted ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. Ah, how sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge, and where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death and drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections step by step till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs, all laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer, that 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the turns blind to the signs on red. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see it, it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, that it bleeds you dry, that it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. False alarm, I thought that help was here. But it was my own reassurance bouncing round 100,000 times in my own ecosphere. If every time you speak you keep it off the record, consequently you can keep your record clear. And if you mute the speech that shakes your frail beliefs, you only seek to insulate your image and continue down the stream in the direction clout and credit steers. Directly from your mouth into am I the asshole Reddit's ears. Directly back into the greasy pockets of some Gates Foundation financiers. And then directly back into the frantic final thoughts of early trial Neuralink volunteers, staring at the numb and mumbling vacancies where recently had been their peers. Half of whom are glitching with the memory stuck on pause, and half have zero fucking clue just who they are or why they're here. It's been said that fear is all we have to fear, but that was back before the basosphere condenser came along, distilling concentrated fear that's diamond pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong, and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere. Where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink 'em twice. Welcome to your ecosphere.
When you are not with where majority of Americans are, then, you know, that is extreme. That is an extreme way of thinking.
Set you free, but I really want to let you be. And a part of me wished I could set myself aside, just let you take the ride, just chalk the rest up to destiny. I could let you believe that the only restraints in life are the size of your dreams. Let you believe each kid grows up with the world at their feet. when I know too well it's open season. I know they're taking stock and raising stocks and raising stock. And I'm simply not here to sit and watch as you learn the lesson all cogs are taught. Keep your head down and keep to task and just keep on blocking the rest of it all out. Just keep on with the rest of the herd of a million adjacent oblivious workers. The forest unseen for the trees, and the trees unseen for the fallout. Now what's more damning, baby, the truth or the ignorance? Fuck it, I honestly wonder if I see the answer so well. Baby, believe me well, I know it's scary, I scare myself. If I could find a way out of my head, I would run like hell. I would ditch this body politic, mindless occupant somewhere far from the dismal abyss. In the tranquil crystalline bliss of the beach, I could rest with the rest of the shells. And if anyone asks I'm anywhere else, if I'm really needed, just light the candle, then read the book, and then ring the bell. Oh, my untarnished heart, my little perfect soul, this world will melt your mercy down so they can sell its gold. This world will take your worth and then demand 1,000-fold. It's full of greedy pigs who'll eat you out of house and home. They'll strip your bank account and sweep you somewhere down the road, and then return to eat your tent and shitty bike you rode. Your bottled water, only shoes and coat and broken phone. Then smiling in your face, they'll tell you that the shelter's closed.
When you are not with where majority of Americans are, then, you know, that is extreme. That is an extreme way of thinking.
Hoped you would never find out, knew that you had to know. Pulling what's left of my mind out, trying to tell you so. I tried to block the light out, knew you could feel its glow. I've been here holding my hands out, trying to keep you close. Trying to keep you Oh, my untarnished heart, my little perfect soul, this world will melt your mercy down so they can sell its gold. This world will take your worth, then demand 1,000-fold. I tried to block the light just so I could keep you close. March of Dimes. Family fun run cancer bonanza. Front page of Apartheid Times. All of the charm of a car bomb. Arms wide open, taking no targets alive. Dark was the night, save for a red glow painting the sky in a sickening light. Like a scene out of hell or a day in an utterly alien life. When the fire runs wild. These are the years where the wild is more your daily drive. To wrestle the truth of extinction from out of the jaws of your pride. So open them wide, now is the time, there's nothing to fight. Blasted or sworn to defy, the end is the same and we're inches away from the line. So abandon your ego to die, the bed that we made is where we go to die. But never was passing in one's own sleep such a hideous sight. Such a storm of convulsion and vile expulsion from out of our mouths and our eyes. But these are the rights they implore us to exercise, with our signature forged and our hands all tied. And with eye contact and a senator's smile, they thank you for saving democracy right as they tighten the binds. Right when they're joining your chain to your neighbors, leading you out in a line. Call it the March of Dimes. One more charity parody. Hold back grants while we dance for the president's salary. Funding the bunkers where all of the wealthy will cower to witness our steepest decline. To err is a trait so inherently human. And to hoard enough wealth that you peacefully sleep when those humans are burning alive is truly divine. If divinity really means withered and fully decaying inside, you could live with yourself till you run out of wine. and ring for a drone off a prime. Skim a little off at the top of the march of dimes. Sign of our system of capital, head to the sky with a hideous cry that mimics the suffering families out on the street that have built a career out of passing by, who were part of the great design, part of a citizen base with its fate resigned, part of a two-party system where both of the goals align.
Who are these people?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of INN News. It's me, Reef Breland, with my co-host, Collin Radix-Carter, aka Care Bear.
And you make fun of me for having mumble mouth.
I know,
What
right?
was that?
I have an excuse.
What's your
But-
excuse?
Weed in my throat hole. But anyway, how are you doing? You doing okay?
I've been all right. Tired. Those of you who may not know, I was on Kit's Hotline Speeder with Kit on Monday, and we had a funky old time doing some stories. And then later on that afternoon, I was on with Kit and CJ for the RBN afternoon show, which was also a lot of fun. So it definitely made for a long day on Monday, and
Yeah.
obviously having to do this, but
Which,
yeah, I'm good.
Which reminds me, I'll be going on Sabrina Salvati's show, the Savvy Sab show, tomorrow to talk about Tara Reid. And her, quote, defection, which we all know that's not really the case. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. I'll try to go in detail on that as much as possible. You know, we've been kind of kept out of the loop on some stuff for safety, so you know, I'll try to figure out what can be said and things like that. So you know, but yeah, stay tuned. Go watch Savvy's tomorrow, 8:00 for that. This Saturday, Bitch with Comrade Misty gonna be a thing this Saturday. So I'm not sure what time. I've yet to get a time yet. So stay tuned.
Missy, that's your cue to let us know what time.
Yes. We should ask before then, and we'll let you know on Twitter. So if you follow at Get Indie News on Twitter, you'll see it. Otherwise, you know, hit the bell, and it might tell you when we go live and whatnot. You know,
Bryce Smith in chat saying 5 Pacific, so that'll be 8 Eastern.
Okay.
Not sure if that's right.
Not sure if that's accurate. I don't know.
Can't confirm or deny that, but look for us on Twitter, and we will tell you.
Yes, Nick, I will be on at 8 p.m. Eastern. I do believe that's when Savvy will have me on. So unless it's 8 her time, which would be Eastern. So
Yes. Normally,
yeah,
when she has guests, they usually go first.
Yeah.
So shortly after 8.
That's what I would go with.
Yeah.
So yeah, make sure to like and share the stream if you haven't already, and super chats are always appreciated. We like recouping the cost it takes to make this show. Mainly our therapists require lots of money. So you know, but we appreciate that.
We also preface by saying this will probably be my weekly sermon. Obviously, we would love to your super chats, as well as like, share, and subscribe, and I'll do all the things. Which, by the way, you guys have been doing the thing and subscribing over the last week. So
yeah, you guys have been killing it. We love you guys. So
that being said, obviously we know this time is rough for a lot of you. Obviously, we are not doing this for the financials. Otherwise, we'll act like some other bigger channels that you know of.
We were told our Putin rain checks had to be cashed up at particular places, and we've yet to find those places. So, you know, it's a little iffy, but you know,
But
look
that
at
being
that,
said,
Dr. Nick
oh,
Riviera with the $5 donation. We appreciate you, fam, because you do amazing work, Collin, and you have to recoup costs. We gotta get new lights. We gotta get new lights, Collin. We gotta get new
I gotta get
lights.
I gotta get a new desk.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Actually, this
problem gets serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Let's grow up.
thanks, Dr. Nick. Thanks, Dr. Nick. Appreciate you. But yeah, like we say probably every week, please take care of yourselves. Please take care of your community. Please take care of your families before you consider giving to us. Obviously, you want to take care of yourselves first, but if you do have extra money on hand and you would love to donate so we're able to continue doing the thing here as well as grow this network, we will appreciate it. So thank you in advance, and we love you. At
we wrote some stories this week.
Yes, we do. And I thought this was actually going to be somewhat of an easy week. Well, I guess it never is in a way. I think only easy in terms of the things that I would have considered talking about this week. I already did with Kit and CJ on Monday. So I figured, okay, I got the trending stories out of the way, so we can do more lesser known stories that we want to share with you guys tonight. And then one of them, unfortunately, is more of an update, but it doesn't give me pleasure to kind of talk about it, given I used to live in this country. I have friends like family in this country, and it saddens me. It was expected, but it still saddens me that this happened. Are you having issues with?
No.
Okay, so let's pull up the
stories. There you go.
The stories. There we go. So President Museveni from Uganda has formally signed the anti-gay bill, which was kind of a hot thing being discussed yesterday. So I am going to talk about that. And I wasn't going to talk about this at all because we talked about my time with the squad last week, and I shared enough on stream on Friday, as well as with Kit on Monday, and a little bit with CJ on Monday afternoon. I figured I was done with this, didn't need to talk about it. But there are some updates to this story, and a thing happened over that weekend that we weren't aware of, and I wouldn't have found out if I wasn't doing a random search for something on the network Sunday night, but we got a little love from a larger network in terms of our reporting that I am going to talk about.
They could take it back, give it back. I don't want that.
Right.
No, that love comes with diseases.
It's not love, but we have to
very itchy love.
Yeah, we have to kind of not clap back, but like I definitely have
after that.
I definitely have some things to say. Those of you who may not know, I did talk about this on Monday, but the Majority Report did pull our story and our clip without our permission, by the way, regarding the part where I respectfully asked Ayanna Pressley regarding the student loan debt in terms of using the Higher Education Act, and she blew me off. So Majority Report had some things to say about it. I'm going to have some things to say about it in response. Hopefully we'll debunk some of the things that they said, but I also got some updates to that we definitely want to talk about. What do you have?
I've got lawyer cheated with ChatGPT and is getting in trouble for that. So that should be interesting for all those people who are terrified of AI. And the Grayzone had an interesting thing, which you might have seen Max Blumenthal talk about today on the Jimmy Dore show. They had an interview with this lady from the National Endowment for Democracy, and had a debate whether they were CIA or not. And we'll see how the Grayzone boys school them. I know Alex Rubenstein and Max do a great job there, so I grabbed an article from them. But anyway, that's what I brought. You ready to get started?
Not really, but we will.
So Leroy.
Yeah, so like I said, yeah, Uganda is now officially anti-gay. As funny enough, we're talking about this, and tomorrow starts Pride Month at that. So I think it's definitely appropriate. But so President Museveni signed this bill. We did talk about this with JB last month, so I forgot to link that video in the subscription. I'll do that after that. But we kind of talked about this in terms of the possibility at that time. And now it's official. So he signed it into law on Monday, and our friend of the show, there were several articles on this, but I pulled this guy. We haven't used his stuff for a while. Shout out to Brett, friend of the show. We've had him on before. But he wrote this up where he writes, Ugandan leader ripped for grave assault on human rights after signing Kill the Gays bill. This is a desperate dark day for LGBTI rights and for Uganda, said Amnesty International Deputy Regional Director for East and Southern Africa. So Brett continues. Human rights defenders around the world on Monday condemned Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni after he signed a bill criminalizing same-sex sexual acts between consenting adults and imposing the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality. Museveni, who is 78 and has ruled the African nation for nearly 4 decades, signed the Anti-Homosexuality Bill of 2023, under which people convicted of aggravated homosexuality, that is, same-sex sexual acts by HIV-positive people or with children, disabled people, or anyone deemed vulnerable, can be hanged to death. The law punishes same-sex acts with life imprisonment and attempted same-sex acts with 10 years behind bars. It also criminalizes the promotion of LGBTQ+ rights. The bill was initially rejected by Museveni last month because he wanted it amended to include a rehabilitation option for LGBTQ.
Yep.
Thank you. For LGBTQ+ people who would like to live normal lives again, according to a presidential spokesperson. The legislation builds on a 2013 law under which life imprisonment was the most severe penalty for same-sex relations. Museveni has said that he finds gay people disgusting. So we're going to play a clip where he says that. Very brief.
I'm still looking for this JB thing.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead.
Western human rights groups, to President Obama, to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people.
Respect African societies and their values. If you don't agree, you just keep quiet. Let's manage our society the way we see. If we are wrong, we shall find out by ourselves. Just the way we don't interfere with yours.
Do you personally dislike homosexuals?
Of course, they are disgusting. What sort of people are they? How can you go? I never knew what they were doing. That's how I've been told recently that what they do is terrible, disgusting. But I was ready to ignore that if there was proof that that's how he's born, abnormal. But now the proof is not there.
Yeah. So it's hard to hear that. You know, as I said, you know, I lived in the country for a bit. I love the people there. Not a fan of their government or him, and I've made that very clear to Ugandans there. So shout out to my Ugandan family, but you know how I feel about Museveni. Like, give you much respect if you like him, but I can't. So anyway, we will continue. If you flip the screen.
There you go. I found the JB stream as well.
Despite our concerted efforts to stop the passage of the anti-homosexuality bill, the president today has legalized state-sponsored homophobia and transphobia by signing this bill into law. Frank Mugisha, executive director of the advocacy group Sexual Minorities Uganda, said in a statement, "It will erode the rights of LGBTQIQ individuals and put innocent Ugandans at crosshairs of grave violations from state and non-state actors," Mugisha added. "We now look forward to the legal challenge in court and the law being repealed." Hours after Museveni signed the bill into law, 11 opponents, including Ugandan parliamentary lawmaker Fox Odoi Omelowo,
Yellow.
Yeah, petitioned the Constitutional Court seeking to block its implementation, the Monitor reports. Amnesty International Deputy Regional Director for East and Southern Africa, Flavia Mwangoa, I'm sorry, I'm butchering these names, said in a statement that this is a desperately dark day for LGBTI rights and for Uganda. The signing of this deeply repressive law is a grave assault on human rights and on the Constitution of Uganda and the regional and international human rights instruments to which Uganda is a part, she continued. The Anti-Homosexuality Bill of 2023 will do nothing other than enshrine discrimination, hatred, and prejudice against LGBTI Ugandans and their allies into law. Bugwanoa added, "It's unconscionable that they risk losing their lives, their freedom, their privacy, their freedom of expression, and their ability to live free from discrimination." So this is a tweet from United Nations Human Rights. "We are appalled that the draconian and discriminatory anti-gay bill is now law. It is a recipe for systematic violations of the rights of LGBT people and the wider population. It conflicts with the Constitution and international treaties and requires urgent judicial review."
Oh, fuck. I can't believe you've done this.
Like, that's pretty much what they're saying.
Yeah. Joseph Borrell, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, called a new law contrary to international human rights law and to Uganda's obligations under the African Charter of Human and People's Rights, including commitments on dignity and non-discrimination and the prohibition of cruel, inhumane, or degrading punishment. In the United States, which gives Uganda about $1 billion in annual assistance, President Joe Biden said in a statement that the enactment of Uganda's Anti-Homosexuality Act is a tragic violation of universal human rights. "I join with people around the world, including many in Uganda, in calling for its immediate repeal," Biden continued. "No one should have to live in constant fear for their life or being subjected to violence and discrimination. It is wrong."
Come on, man.
So Biden gave a statement, and surprisingly to many, but not surprising to me, Ted Cruz, yes, the very Ted Cruz, actually sent a tweet. Wait, did I pass it? Actually, no, I didn't get to that yet. So sorry. But we'll get there anyhow. This shameful act is the latest development in an alarming trend of human rights abuses and corruption in Uganda, Biden asserted, adding that his administration is considering sanctions and restriction of entry into the United States against anyone involved in serious human rights abuses or corruption. Ugandan parliamentary speaker Annette Among said her U.S. visa had been revoked. Even some congressional Republicans, some of whom back anti-LGBTQ plus legislation in the United States, condemned the new Ugandan law, including Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, who called it grotesque and an abomination. So he writes, "This Uganda law is horrific and wrong. Any law criminalizing homosexuality or opposing the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality is grotesque and an abomination. All civilized nations should join together in condemning this human rights abuse.
Oh, I see why he got it.
Why?
Well, if I were to take a guess, this last sentence here means we need to be the world police and go deal with this.
Right. So yeah, so notice how Biden said sanctions. So we will get to that. We will get to that. Don't worry. But from a personal level, this does make sense that Ted Cruz said this, because I believe, and correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, that he has at least 2 daughters.
Yes.
I believe.
One which I know of is, LGBTQ.
Bisexual and a teen. So obviously for Ted, this would be a personal issue for him. So I can understand, because people are like, why would Ted Cruz said that? Because has been against, he's been pro like anti-gay stuff in the past. One of his daughters came out as bi, and so I'm sure he's kind of taken a huge step back from that in life, his own daughters, which kind of proves for like politicians are not entitled to do shit unless it affects them personally. So
yeah.
So
which this doesn't affect him impersonally, but personally enough,
Well, personally enough in terms of the implications of what this means for like his daughter, but not personally in terms of these are people of color in another country. So yes, you're right. But we are going to get to the sanctions part, because we talked about this with JB. We're going to talk about it again.
And he called it too.
Yes.
As well as Zimbabwe. But yes.
But anyway, Brett continues. Same-sex sexual acts were already illegal in Uganda, one of around 30 African and 60 world nations that criminalize such acts under the 2013 law and legislation passed during colonization by Britain. Prior to colonization's imported homophobia, Uganda had a history of tolerated sexual diversity, including among the Baganda, the country's largest ethnic group, and Lango, who recognize a third gender, the Mukuto Dago. King Mwanda II, who ruled the Baganda people in the 1880s, was famously bisexual. Right-wing evangelical Christians from the United States have played a key role in the introduction of anti-LGBTQ+ legislation in African nations. Yeah, this is my last one. Attacks on LGBTQ+ rights and people, including the murders of activists including David Kato and Brian Westlaw, have increased in Uganda this century. Mugisha said that the new law will bring a lot of harm to Uganda's already persecuted LGBTQ+ community. We feel so worried, he told Annonce France Press. So what I'm going to play now. So if you go back, found this on Twitter. So I believe this is from African Rights, I believe. So as we try to get some voices from the ground, and so this is kind of my part in kind of hearing what Africans who live in or near Uganda think of this. So you got to hear what they have to say.
Cool.
This is bad news. It's not just for queer Ugandans, but for queer people across the African continent.
In our country, we will have our morals. We will protect our children. And we are making this law. We are making this law for ourselves. We are making this law for our children. We are making this law for the children of our children.
To reduce any kind of human being, irrespective of their sexuality, to a death sentence based on who they identify as and how they choose to live their lives is something that we should all feel very ashamed about as a continent.
So if we don't stand our ground as a country, as a people, as a community, then we will completely have seceded our sovereignty and independence as a country.
The President, in principle, congratulated the members of Parliament on two fronts. One, for the strong stand on the anti-homosexuality bill, and two, for rejecting pressure from the imperialists.
Senseless killing, honestly. I'd rather they invested that time in finding criminals and whatnot instead of like making a decision like God, on a God level, on some, because you're this way and I'm this way and you don't conform to my way, you're gonna die.
With regards to the news today from Uganda, personally, I find it incredibly disappointing, but I am not surprised that this is happening. It has been a work in progress for a very long time. And when you look at the history of Uganda and how this bill has surfaced and resurfaced on multiple levels, it was just a matter of time.
Yep. I mean, this is, Dr. Nick's right. This is bad news for people in general, because here's what happens. Once the goobers in gooberment realize that they can do it to the weakest, and they'll roll that out to the rest of society incrementally.
Yeah, it's funny that Biden is calling Uganda out when people within the community really, yeah, they have more rights here, but even right now, those are being taken away as well. And I would argue that if you are LGBT in this country, it's not exactly safe for you either. It's not perfect here either. So, yeah, it's just funny that he calls out Museveni for this, but check your own house, because you have issues in regards to LGBTQ rights. And once upon a time, you've
seen there's a television series that Stephen Fry put on about anti-gay stuff in general, right? And I'm pretty sure he went to Uganda and talked to like the radio DJ that's famous for being anti-gay pastor there, and talked to a woman with an incredible story about her abuse and stuff with that and things like that. It was really good. If you haven't watched it, they should. I should show it to you after the show ends, at least that episode.
But yeah, so we had this discussion with JB regarding how a lot of this anti-gay sentiment in African countries, Uganda in particular, comes from the West. Yeah. Surprise, not surprise. I found this article. Now, eat this article with a grain of salt, because it is interesting. A lot of the stuff that has been said here, I haven't necessarily heard of, or I just want to kind of go a little deeper into this in terms of seeing if what Leah Buckle, this article is from Stonewall, which is based in the UK, wrote. But it does make some connections to what we discussed with JB a month ago in terms of, once upon a time. I wouldn't say that Africa as a whole was like, you cannot be gay, whatever, but there was, you can argue, a freedom of expression in terms of gender, or at least more fluid thinking in terms of thinking of gender and sexuality, until colonization came into the mix and totally eradicated that. And like I said, all articles that we use in the show, you'll find them in the description if you want to read them for yourself, especially if we don't read all the articles entirely. I'm going to read most of this, though, because I think it does make for interesting, some interesting context to how Africa used to be, according to her. So this article, African Sexuality and the Legacy of Imported Homophobia, and Leah writes, note, thank you. In June, and I believe this article was written in the fall of 2020, just to give some context there. In June, Botswana overturned colonial-era laws which criminalized homosexuality, with the judge, Michael Lebrew, declaring that the anti-sodomy laws are British import and were developed without the consultation of local peoples. Sound familiar?
Yep.
If this was viewed as a massive success and a historical moment across the continent, despite this, the more than half of the countries in Africa outlaw sexual homosexuality, with 4 enforcing the death penalty. Now Uganda is one of them. At a time where we see more and more countries worldwide becoming progressive with regards to LGBT rights, why does Africa still maintain their anti-LGBT stance? Is homosexuality, rather than homophobia, a Western import, as claimed by Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni? Of course not. There is a direct correlation between the countries which belong to the Commonwealth and therefore have previously been under British rule and countries that still have homophobic, biphobic, and/or transphobic legislature in their constitutions. 25% of the world's population, 2.4 billion people, currently live in a country belonging to the Commonwealth. However, they make up a disproportionate large 50% of countries that still criminalize homosexuality. But this phenomenon is specific to those under British rule. By the 13th century in France, punishments for male homosexuality include castration for the first offense. But the French repealed the anti-sodomy laws after the First French Revolution in 1750, 2 centuries prior to the British in 1967. This is then echoed in La Francophonie nations. Out of 54 member states, only 33% of these criminalize homosexuality, in comparison to 66% of Commonwealth nations. Prior to European colonization, throughout the African continent, we see far different, more relaxed attitudes towards sexual orientation and gender identity. As far back as 2400 BC, tombs have been excavated in ancient Egypt with 2 men's bodies, Neakum and Khnumhotep, pronunciation, sorry, embracing each other as lovers. In addition to their acceptance of same-sex relationships, ancient Egyptians, similar to other civilizations at the time, not only acknowledged a third gender, but venerated it. Many deities were portrayed androgynously, and goddesses such as Mut, the goddess of motherhood, literal translation mother, as Sekhmet, goddess of war, are often depicted as women with erect penises. This was not unique to Egypt or this time period. In the 16th century, the Imbala people of Angola had men in women's apparel with whom they kept amongst their wives. In contrast, King Henry VIII had just signed the Buggery Act in 1533 in England, which criminalized sex between 2 males. The last men to be sentenced to death by hanging in England were in 1835 for engaging in homosexual sex, whilst at the same time there was an openly gay monarch, King Muganda II of Buganda, present-day Uganda, who actively opposed Christianity and colonialism. The Igbo and Yoruba tribes, mostly found in present-day Nigeria, those are my tribes, shout out, did not have a binary of genders and typically did not assign gender to babies at birth and instead waited until later life. Similarly, the Dagaba people, present-day Ghana, assign gender not based on one's anatomy, but rather the energy one presents. In the royal palaces of northern Sudan, daughters were sometimes given slave girls for sex. For centuries across the African continent, there was a completely different attitude towards sexual and gender identities. Many African countries did not see gender as a binary in the way that their European colonizers did, nor did they correlate anatomy to gender identity. In no African country prior to colonization do we see any persecution of LGBT individuals because of their sexuality, nor any anti-LGBT laws. So how, despite a very relaxed attitude towards homosexuality and gender fluidity, for almost all of its recorded history, has Africa become one of the most difficult continents to be LGBT? Colonization and the spread of fundamentalist Christian attitudes from the British meant that much of Africa lost its previous cultural attitude towards sexual orientation and gender identity and were forced to adopt new values from British colonizers in the 19th and 20th centuries. Homophobia was legally enforced by colonial administrators and Christian missionaries. In 1910, Christians made up about 9% of the population of sub-Saharan Africa. By 2010, the figure had leapt to 63%. Anti-LGBT laws were not only written into constitutions, but also into the minds of many African people, and after the passing of several generations, this has become dogma. While many of the countries... Yes, I have, actually. While the majority of the countries under British rule are now independent, the majority who still criminalize homosexuality, including Jamaica and Uganda, have carried over these laws from the colonial era. Generations later, many Africans now believe that an anti-gay attitude is one that is part of their culture. So much so that former Zimbabwean President Mugabe labeled homosexuality as a white disease. The association of homosexuality as something Western is echoed throughout the ex-Commonwealth and particularly in African and Caribbean nations. For many who had their lives and cultures stripped from them by the British, Westernness is to be treated with suspicion and is essential to hold on to any part of themselves and their culture they can. This, combined with the fact that Western countries have threatened to deny aid to these countries unless they conform to their ideals, has hindered the fight for LGBT rights in African countries. For instance, when ex-Prime Minister David Cameron threatened to withdraw aid from Uganda as they were not adhering to proper human rights, the president advisor responded with, "But this kind of ex-colonial mentality of saying, you do this or I withdraw my aid, will definitely make people extremely uncomfortable with being treated like children." It is clear that top-down reform, with the Western world leading the way, is not going to be the road that Africans take to change their anti-LGBT laws. Skepticism towards the West and homophobia are far too closely intertwined. Rejecting pro-LGBT legislation is rejecting neo-colonialism and is in favor of African nationalism, self-determination, and self-worth. Unfortunately, African homophobia is a tricky mix of anti-neocolonialism, politics, and religion, made worse by the HIV/AIDS crisis. This crisis has led Africans to associate HIV/AIDS and death as a consequence for being gay, similar to American attitudes towards HIV/AIDS during the United States AIDS crisis of the 80s. So what is the future of LGBT rights in Africa? In many countries...
Who was part of that?
Go ahead.
Do you remember? You remember who's part of that AIDS epidemic thing? Starts with an F, particular doctor?
Yes, I do. And it's funny, glad you mentioned that, because it's funny, like, people are giving him praise now, and very quickly, we forget our history that he was not a fan of the gay community, I will say that. Yes.
Yeah. Worked with Dr. Drew during that. Dr. Drew got orders from that guy during that period of time.
Right.
And he talks about how terrible that was.
Right.
And how they should have done everything different.
So in many countries, despite the legacy of colonization, citizens are taking a more autonomous stance in LGBTQ plus legislature, with the queer communities taking the lead instead of external pressures from the West. Across the world, countries that have improved their LGBT rights records have done so because of the hard work, organizing, and leadership of local LGBT groups and communities, and the case of Africa is no different. Enforcing top-down change from the West would do little to change the attitudes of Africans towards homosexuality. This is a struggle that must be led by local LGBT communities who know best what they need and how to fight for it. So essentially kind of what we say. It has to be a bottom-up approach. And I would argue, I think, as I've said on streams before, I think a lot of things, especially given social media, it is very sparse in Africa. it is extremely hard to get like updated information. As I say, generally, like Africa is usually 5 to 10 years behind of everyone else in terms of tech, in terms of information. So a lot of the ideas, and I think especially since religion is so ingrained in African culture that it's so intertwined and it's so fundamentalist, it is extremely hard for people to think differently outside of what they know from church, because that's basically all you do, especially if you live in the bush. You work, you go to school, if you're lucky, and go to church. That's it. It's not like people in the bush are watching TV to kind of hear or able to go online to kind of read or listen to different ideas, so that's what makes it very difficult. And especially given, and I said this with JB on that segment that we did with him a month ago, the median age, especially in Uganda, is 15. So it's very young, very impressionable. And a lot of these missionaries, and I could say that because once upon a time I was connected with these groups before I knew better. They are very impressionable, and they definitely, and many of the teachings, especially like church teachings, are often inaccurate. So they're getting a lot of wrong ideas, and they're implementing that in the churches with these essentially young people. So it's a lot of fair-based doctrine, and a lot of conformity to kind of do things the right way under the eyes of God. So anything that kind of counters that would be considered sinful, or, like to the point where, you could be, estranged from your family, or worse yet, killed, depending on the circumstances. So it's a lot of fear-based mentality in Uganda in terms of, especially in terms of people who are in authority. So you do not question your leaders. You do not, unlike here where we kind of do that all the time. It's always expected that you do generally, but over there is pretty much the opposite. Like, you accept anything that anyone in authority tells you, even if they're wrong. So it doesn't make for a good mix of having a sentiment, especially in terms of LGBTQ rights or anything of the sort, is very hard to counter. So, it's hard, because, obviously you have to deal with a lot of red tape, as Leah said, in terms of politics and religion are so intertwined. But as she said, the way to do it is within, from the bottom up. But even that's tricky, just, because a lot of this stuff has to be done underground. Otherwise,
Karen in the chat, wait, didn't Uganda find a lot of gold?
We're getting to that. We're definitely getting to that. We know you guys are smart, and but let's get into that. Because I actually, wait. Did I get this tweet before? No, there was a tweet before that that I added.
Why doesn't it show up there? Okay, hold on. I'll go get it.
Yeah.
Well, let's do that. While I do that. Okay. Hold on, you're good.
Okay.
Keep talking.
So
you're good.
Yeah, actually, I'll just read it. So I saw this today, which made me mad. So our friend Marianne Williamson, she retweeted this issue from the New York Times, and she said, "Nothing is more dangerous than bigotry codified into law. What Uganda has done decriminalizing LGBTQ should be condemned by the entire world." So I kind of went off on her on Twitter, basically being like, and I didn't put it here, but basically saying a lot of that sentiment is due from the West and the church. So get your facts right. And then, yes, so this tweet is what Marianne kind of spilled out into the Twitter universe. And then shout out to I Am a Marxist for Life. He he or she tweets back, "Don't worry too much because the US will use this as an excuse to liberate that 17 trillion in gold recently discovered, but even you know this and are playing right into the Pentagon's hands. Marianne Williamson doing the work of the CIA." And,
gold.
I asked Reef specifically to fill that. At least that's one time. And one thing I do love about our Twitter and our community is that when all of this was going on, especially kind of reading everything, you guys are smart. You guys figured out, especially as I said earlier, the call for possible sanctions. Immediately people were like, well, what resource do they have that would warrant them to pull the sanction card? And a lot of you said this already, and we've talked about this on the show before. And I'm going to pull this up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. I
gotta go back.
a couple. Yeah.
Here it is.
There we go. So a lot of you guys are so smart. And a lot of you called this out. And I just pulled this article from Reuters. But Uganda says exploration results show it has 31 million tons in gold ore. So Uganda on Wednesday, so this was over the spring, I believe, said recent exploration surveys have shown it has gold ore deposits of around 31 million tons, and it wants to attract big investors to develop the sector hitherto dominated by small wildcat miners. Over the past 2 years, aerial exploration was done across the country, followed by geophysical and geochemical surveys analysis. Solomon Mutiba, spokesman for the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, told Reuters. Mutiba said an estimated 320,158 tons of refined gold could be extracted from the 31 million tons of ore. But most of the deposits were discovered in Karajoya, a parched, sprawling area in the country's northeastern corner of the border with Kenya. Large reserves were also found in eastern, central, and western areas of the East African country. Butia said Wagai, a Chinese company, had set up a mine in Busia in eastern Uganda and was expected to start production this year. Gee, the plot thickens, Reef. Wagai had invested $200 million, he said, and its mine will have a refining unit. President Yoweri Museveni's government has been seeking to ramp up investment in mining to develop resources like copper, iron ore, gold, cobalt, and phosphates. Parliament early this year enacted a new mining law that, once signed by the president, will pave way for the creation of a state mining company. The company will compulsorily acquire a 15% stake in every mining operation, and investors will be required to sign a production sharing agreement with the government. Previously, investors were given mining production licenses on a first-come, first-served basis. So yes. So we've said this on the show. We've warned you guys about this. I remember even as early as in the fall that there was reports that Uganda had discovered gold, and I was like, you guys need to keep your big mouth shut because the US will want it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this doesn't help any matters in terms of Museveni. And I'm going to be very fair. Museveni is shit. Like, if you think Biden is bad, I would argue Museveni is worse. He's very much the stereotypical African politician that you will think of in every way, and he definitely plays into the hand of a West way too much. I wouldn't be surprised if this is kind of a ploy for him to have America kind of step in terms of essentially seizing, their resources that, as, like China's already there making that investment. And now I believe this is just a hot take, by the way. Like he's trying to be greedy and trying to get the West involved as well, so he can rack up the profit for himself and anyone close to him at the expense of his people. So I kind of feel like him really pushing this anti-gay sentiment in a way was on purpose in light of getting the West's attention. And it worked. So yeah, so like I said, I think we'll definitely continue to watch this story.
Yep.
Especially since I have a personal stake in this. And as I said, it pains me to kind of report a story like that, but just know from being on the ground, and this is something I'll say all the time, Ugandans, like at least the ones I met, are very sweet, very kind, and very loving people. And again, shout out to my Ugandan friends and family, who I call family now, who have taken care of me, when I first lived there and in trips since, have really shown me the love in terms of showing me their country, the hospitality that made me feel comfortable and at ease, living there and in visits since. So I don't want to have you guys think that this sentiment is across the board among Ugandans in general. It's just that there's a lot of issues in terms of religion that, unfortunately, as I said, is a fear-based environment that it's very scary to question people in authority just generally. So it's not, so this kind of sentiment, unless that changes, it's not due to Ugandans having this thought. It's due to what has been placed in their culture just due to the colonization of Africa in general. So I do want to preface that this sentiment is not shared by the whole of the population, but rather, in a way, I feel compelled to share more because they're going to be in a position where they're going to be too afraid to speak up, due to their safety. So I feel on their behalf, I should.
Right.
In terms of sharing that this is not indicative of what the population might believe, even though some might, but many are willing to kind of think differently if they had the right resources and if their safety wasn't on the line. In terms of having a certain thought or calling this out may result in capital punishment, essentially, for them. So
which is wild they still have that even. But
yeah.
Speaking
So
of
it's very
capital
sad.
punishment, in other news, lawyer cheats with ChatGPT, everyone's favorite AI procrastinating saver. But in this text might not be the best use case. So, Collin thought this would be boring. I hope it's not, but we'll get into it. This article itself may have been written by AI, but it says it's by Catherine Armstrong over at BBC News. So we'll take her word for it. So a New Yorker is facing a court hearing of his own after his firm used AI tool ChatGPT for legal research. The judge said the court was faced with an unprecedented circumstance after a filing was found to reference example legal cases that didn't exist. They just didn't exist.
So the AI fucked up.
Yes. Which you hope it's for the defense, because the prosecution, what are you here in jail for, Collin? Ah, man, and fucking ChatGPT fucking fucked up, dude. The lawyer who used the tool told the court he was unaware that the content could be false. ChatGPT creates original text on request, but comes with warnings it can produce inaccurate information. So, the original case involved a man suing an airline over an alleged personal injury. His legal team submitted a brief that cited several previous court cases in an attempt to prove using precedent why the case should move forward. But the airline's lawyers later wrote to the judge to say they could not find several of the cases that were referenced in the brief.
Oh, God.
6 of the submitted cases appears to be bogus judicial decisions with bogus quotes and bogus internal citations. Judge Castle wrote in an order demanding the man's legal team explain itself. Don't use ChatGPT to write that explanation. Don't do that. No, that's going to be bad. Over the course of several filings, it emerged that the research had not been prepared by Peter LaDuca, the lawyer for the plaintiff, but by a colleague of his at the same law firm. Stephen A. Schwartz, who has been an attorney for more than 30 years, used ChatGPT to look for similar previous cases. In his written statement, Mr. Schwartz clarified that Mr. LaDuca had not been part of the research and had no knowledge of how it had been carried out. Mr. Schwartz added that he greatly regrets relying on the chatbot, which he said he had never used for legal research before and was, quote, unaware that its content could be false. He has vowed to never use AI to supplement his legal research in future without absolute verification of its authenticity. Screenshots attached to the filing appear to show a conversation between Mr. Schwartz and ChatGPT. Is Varghese a real case? Reads one message, referring Varghese v. China, Southern Airlines Co. Ltd., one of the cases that no other lawyers could find. ChatGPT responds that yes, it is, prompting S to ask, what is your source? After double checking, ChatGPT responds again that the case is real and can be found on legal reference databases such as LexisNexis and Westlaw. It says that the other cases it has provided to Mr. Schwartz are also real. Both lawyers who work for the firm Levedov, and Oberman have been ordered to explain why they should not be disciplined at an 8 June hearing. Millions of people have used ChatGPT since it launched in November 2022. It can answer questions in natural human-like language, and it can also mimic other writing styles. It uses the internet as it was in 2021 as its database. Right? So that sentence feels ChatGPT wrote to me. But there have been concerns over the potential risks of artificial intelligence, including the potential spread of misinformation and bias. What do you think, Care Bear? What's your thoughts on this?
Okay, so you're right. It wasn't boring at all.
Yeah. It has some precedent and stuff.
But it does bring up the wondering for me. How effective could AI be? Not now, but like within the next decade or so.
It said that ChatGPT has passed the bar in other places. You can look that up. That it has the knowledge to be able to pass a bar exam. So, like,
that doesn't give me
right.
But that doesn't give me confidence though, because the technology is still new-ish.
Yes.
So I mean, just as an aside, we use like one of the programs that we use to do our shorts.
Is
AI. Through AI. It's brand new. It is it's a couple months old. Job. It's a decent job, and it's not great. Like there definitely have been clips.
I'll say this.
Like
with AI, and because I feel like it's another. The only thing that AI does, in theory, is loads of iterations of the same task, right? Right. Like, in this case, it's using questions you give it in ChatGPT to then search its databases to find answers, right? And based off the answers it's given before and whether they were right or not, and whether someone found them helpful or not, it will do that again, right? So it's just algorithms in general that have good databases to work from, right?
Right.
But you give AI enough iterations and enough data to work with, the data it spits back out can be incredibly useful, time-saving, and You know,
Yes,
to me, this is a similar problem to automation as a whole, right? Stephen Hawking, which I should pull this quote, talks about, well, the way to deal with it is to share the wealth that automation makes, right? And I'm abbreviating for time, but that's essentially what he stated in a Reddit thread long time ago. People can look it up. But you know, I think there's a lot of just fear of the unknown with this, right? It's the classic God of the Gaps problem that, yes, if you attach AI to a dangerous system that you're not sure of what it can and can't do, the issue is, Collin, we get into the problem of sentience, which we can go into old episodes of Star Trek to figure out how that's going to work. But there's a guy used to work at Google, now doesn't, started asking these AIs questions that were akin to, are you conscious or not, right? And making sure it had permission to ask questions, treating it as a sentient being, which is not a bad idea. You know, like, this is a thing you are asking to do this task for you, essentially. Like, how much self-awareness is it capable of? You know? So,
I mean,
does it want to continue living? Those kind of things. Like, are we making the proponents for consciousness and life? That's the question. Will it pass Turing tests and things like that? So, yeah, I mean,
it's still kind of wild to think about in terms of, I think even with some of the programs that we use that incorporate AI, they're okay.
Yeah.
But to be fair,
they can only get better. Yeah.
Right. It will only get better. So that's kind of what I'm going in with that thought process with. It can be a tool that could be useful, but to fully depend on it, I think, at least at this point, is not wise.
No, I mean, me and Indy used it to try to have we found an AI that would make a presentation for you if you put in like an article or website, and it got stuff completely wrong. So I wouldn't take it at full value right now, but it's also, you have to give it its due where it is capable of doing stuff that I mean, to me, it's the same thing as like when people first started figuring out computers. Like, yeah, you could just play Pong on it if you wanted to, but you could also make like James Cameron movies at the time, you know? Like, it was just what you were capable of getting it to do. So, you know,
but all this to say with this lawyer, it just kind of is. This guy was just basically lazy that he didn't want to do the work himself. So he used, that's just the crux of it. And that's why I find it hilarious.
Well, and the fact is that it replied. It replied, no, these are real things. You just can't find them. But they're here and here. And then when they looked there, they still couldn't find it. But that doesn't mean they might not have been there in 2001. Whenever these things were like designed. So we'd have to research further. You know, I just find it funny. You probably shouldn't be using it in like the medical field, in like anything where human lives are at stake in the making of it. Like, I would avoid that. You know, our buddy Oz has a rule. He uses AI stuff a lot too, but he doesn't use it on anyone's likeness that is alive. Like, you know, so, but yeah, anyway, I found the story interesting enough to cover, so.
It is interesting. And I think definitely something, I think especially as AI, ChatGPT, you know, has gained popularity this year and will continue to, I think it will continue to be the trending thing. That I think it's something that we should be, as you said, it's kind of like using computers initially, using the internet initially. You know, I think
as long as you're careful, I think that it's a tool that can be effective.
It's a tool. It can be a tool that can be effective, but we also have to be aware of the limitations that it's able to do currently. It's not to say it won't get better, but we can't fully invest in the technology to expect us to do the things that we would like it to do at this point without it being potentially wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what I would caution people with if they're working with, you know, like stuff that involves some type of AI component.
Well, you ready to get to our next story? Speaking of AI people,
Not sure why you said it like that, but yeah, I'm ready. So as I said, I thought I was done with this story. We talked about this. Well, you guys saw the clips last week of me going to the squad campaign event. That's essentially what it was on Wednesday. We talked about it on Friday here, and then I spoke about this a little bit more with Kit on Monday. So I figured I was completely done. No need to do this anymore. But as I said earlier, so Sunday night, I was minding my own business. I was on my way to see a friend. I was checking something on the network, looking for a video or something, and then my name was highlighted in the search. My name was highlighted with a video from the Majority Report, and I was like, "Wait, what? Like, why is there the connection to Majority Report?" And sure enough, when I checked, they used the video of me asking Ayanna Pressley the question regarding student debt, and they critiqued it.
Okay.
We'll get to that. Because I do have some things to say to counter what they were saying.
Right.
But more importantly, so we know about the debt ceiling bill business that's been going on for the last couple of weeks. And, you know, McCarthy and Biden basically came to a deal that is currently going through Congress now. I believe the last I checked, just before we came live, it passed in the Senate. So, and of course, the usual case of characters went to the Republican side to ensure that it passed. So you can guess who they were. But this was pulled yesterday, and this is a Truthout article by probably a friend by now, Carol Zhang.
Yeah.
Sharon Zhang, where she where she writes, debt limit deal prohibits Biden from extending student loan payment pause again. The bill would implement a sweeping change for student debt at a time of great uncertainty for borrowers. So yeah, we're going to talk about student debt again. Hopefully not for a while. But this is important given the updates. So Sharon continues, the debt ceiling deal struck between President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy throws student debtors under the bus by forcing student loan payments to restart at the end of this summer with recourse for the presidential administration. The bill mandates that the ongoing student loan payment pause, which has been in place since March of 2020, will end on August 30th, forcing people to begin repayments in September or risk default. Further, it bars the Biden administration from issuing another extension of the pause, which has changed people's lives financially as the nation struggles through ongoing economic precarity. Except, as expressed authorized by an act of Congress, the bill stipulates, the Secretary of Education may not use any authority to extend the payment pause. If the deal is passed through Congress and the U.S. avoids a national default, which could be economically disastrous, it would implement a sweeping change at a time of great uncertainty for student debtors. The Supreme Court has yet to make a ruling on Biden's plan to cancel up to $20,000 of student debt for borrowers across the country, meaning that tens of millions of debtors who could have their debt balances reduced or wiped out entirely under the plan could find themselves once again having to pay off the full balance of their loans after years of relief under the pause. The deal is a major blow to debtors and activists who say that the proposal to end the pause is hasty and irresponsible with the Supreme Court ruling in the balance. The Biden administration was gearing up to resume payments because they were going to simultaneously cancel knots of debt. 20 million accounts is zeroed out. Because of COVID's impact, the Biden administration said returning to repayment needed to be coupled with relief, the debt collective pointed out on Twitter on Monday, echoing the Biden administration's own arguments before the Supreme Court earlier this year. The deal then puts the cart before the horse, the group wrote. If SCOTUS rules Biden cannot implement relief, Biden can try again with a different legal authority, and he should. But what if it takes a few weeks, months to implement? What if he doesn't try again? Borrowers will have no debt relief but be expected to make costly payments. The debt collective recently uncovered that the legal basis for a Republican state lawsuit against Biden's student debt plan is reportedly outright false. However, the Supreme Court appears sympathetic to the Republican state's case anyway, and it's likely to rule to nix the plan.
Right.
The combination of no debt relief and restarting of payments would have negative effects on the economy. According to a Federal Reserve survey released last week, 37% of Americans did not have enough money to cover a $400 emergency expense in 2022, with 35% of Americans saying they were worse off than the previous year, a record high. Restarting payments and interest would only exacerbate these economic problems, with many people saying that they are unprepared to begin repaying loans. This would especially impact lower income and Black and Latinx Americans, as research has continually found that student debt disproportionately affects these groups. Republicans have targeted student debt forgiveness in other ways. Last week, House Republicans, joined by 2 conservative Democrats, voted to pass legislation that would block Biden's cancellation plan, end the payment pause, and cruelly force borrowers to pay retroactive payments on student debt payments that were suspended under the pause, according to student debt activist groups.
We're fucked.
Yeah. So, read all of that. We know the deal, basically, with all of that. So, all right. So here's the part that does not give me much pleasure. And Reef, I'm very sorry that we ever had to come to this.
Yeah.
We are going to play the majority report. Hell, I feel compelled to do it since they took my clip without our permission.
The hoes be knowing.
I mean, I'm just kind of surprised that, it got their attention, but I do think it relates to something that I think a lot of you on Twitter saw that Ayanna did that I think indirectly, not to say it helped, but it might have put some fire under Ayanna in terms of what she said to me last week. So we are going to play most of what Majority Reports report on me and this regarding what I asked her, and they're going to critique it. And then we're going to debunk some shit after that. So, if you don't mind, Reef.
Yeah.
Play the clip.
Yep, I'm rolling the bean footage.
And I'm sorry to kill you.
Biden loan forgiveness program, not as robust as it should be, but it is a start. Is at the Supreme Court. Biden's particular plan was premised under the authorization that the Secretary of Education has to forego debt, to put it on moratorium as the Trump administration did, that the Biden administration did, or to relieve it as we see all the time. In this instance, under the auspices of COVID, because there was an emergency. This is a statute that came up in the wake of 9/11. A lot of people argue that they had other authority in which to do it. This, I think, is a representation of the understanding of at least Ayanna Pressley, who came out with Elizabeth Warren calling for $50,000 debt under a different auspices. That is the general power of the Secretary of Education to forgive this debt. And here's how she responded at a Justice Dems organizing event. And I'll say what's fascinating about this is like, I don't know INN.
Indie News Network.
Indie News Network.
You're going to find out, though, won't you?
They're the ones who recorded this. They put it up as if this made her look like she was trying to avoid the question.
She was. Did you not hear the word salad that we're all about to listen to again? When she knows this.
And
fucking God.
It seemed like they hadn't listened to the entire clip, or I don't know what.
We made the clip.
I made the clip. And I was there.
Me, regardless of how you interpret her saying, like, I shouldn't answer this.
I literally put the subtitles in myself, Sam. Like, bro.
We were told we shouldn't answer questions, which I get was a function of like how much time that they needed.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't about time.
So you guys heard this. So actually keep playing it. Play it until I ask the question and pause.
But she answers the question, and she's clearly laying out a strategy, at least that she thinks exists. They go to the Supreme Court with this authorization, and if that doesn't work, they go to the next one. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but that seems to be the strategy. And remember, Congress, in passing the American Rescue Act in February of 2021, said that any loan forgiveness given by the Department of Education would not be considered a taxable benefit, which is important because generally loan forgiveness is a taxable benefit.
Care, but it's not important.
If you owe $50,000 and it's forgiven, you actually pay taxes on that $50,000 because you got it.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, you got it.
Or not. Or you could not.
And so Congress did anticipate loan forgiveness, which means that they also contemplated the idea that it was legal, that the president had this authority. So remember that when the Supreme Court says Congress didn't explicitly give this authority, they certainly thought they did. Here's Ayanna Pressley.
Congressman, didn't you give a memo to Biden with Senator Warren regarding student debt to tell him to use the Higher Education Act?
Let me just say this, because I want to get.
So, sorry to do this again, but I asked, didn't you and Liz Warren write a memo to Joe Biden asking him to cancel student loan debt using the Higher Education Act? That was basically yes or no, right?
Yep.
She gives this word salad for 2 minutes. If she could have said, yes, I did, but Biden fucked up, and here's my plan from here. Or she could have straight out lied to me and say, no, I didn't. But she knows here I'm telling the truth here. Because then she goes into the idea of like, oh, I can't answer. I'm not allowed to answer any questions. First of all, and I said this on Kit, probably Hakeem basically said to them, don't say shit. That's my guess.
They knew that this debt thing was coming up. Probably then they knew that like that there was they knew there wasn't a contingency plan. Like, because Biden's already saying give the money back.
Mm-hmm. Like,
that's the White House official statements, right?
Right. As well as Secretary Cardona.
Right.
Who's the Department of Ed. And we've reported on this several times. So, basically right here, I caught her. And she knows that.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, she could have said yes. And maybe give more of an explanation if she wanted to. But instead, she goes off on something really that has no bearing on what I asked her.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Get in trouble if I start taking questions from the floor, okay? But
pause it. I want to make it clear. they were in the middle of a conversation and a guy yelled out. So they had not, you can hear he doesn't have a microphone. And so she's clearly not talking. She's going to get in trouble from the president of the United States.
No one said that, Sam. No one said that that's who she would get in trouble by. Who would she get in trouble by, Sam? Who? The audience is suddenly going to be upset because she's taking too long when they paid $75 a piece?
Well, depending. I paid $75.
Right. Like, I think they got some time. You know?
Right.
Like, I think they're going to be fine. They were more than willing to take questions from pre-selected audience members.
No,
like,
no, I wouldn't even
they had
say
that one person.
No, they didn't even do that. They didn't even do that. I'm pretty sure that the questions that they asked, we have well, at least 90%
well,
of the
there was
coverage,
like
because
people who like there was a poem, there was like
but there wasn't like people who were asking, like in the audience, who were asking questions. It was all controlled.
Right.
You know, it was all controlled. It was the MC, my MC, who was asking them questions. So again, we have full cover, or at least 95% of the coverage of the event on our channel. If you want to watch it, it's a little over an hour. If you want to, null yourself to sleep over a lot of it, fine, your choice. It's there. But yeah, they did several things. They call me as some guy. It's funny because in their description they were like INN's.
They have you. Right. Yeah, exactly.
But they're saying some guy. Number one. Number
they don't
two,
know who INN is, but they know that it's INN, Indie News Network. They were able to figure it out. You can do some cursory, watch one video, Sam. Watch a video. We covered this whole thing last week. Watch that one.
And they're saying that I interrupted her. I sure the fuck did.
Yeah, welcome to what you should be doing. Fuck faces.
I sure the fuck did. As I said, I paid $75. I wasn't going to stand there and just listen to them gaslight me and not get a return on my investment by asking them a question, at least one. So I bet they didn't even know that people had to pay.
Yeah, but they were like,
who are these people?
Who are these people?
Who are these people?
She's clearly saying the organizers, this was not supposed to be question answer because things would go to crazy. But here she answers it anyways.
No, she doesn't answer it. Don't even. You know better.
Yeah, just move forward to where you don't need to watch.
Expand the courts.
You can move forward to where the
expand the courts.
It down, and then they're going to come back, and it seems like she's implying that that using the broader authority is at least
You're going to guess what she's implying on, Sam? Okay, go ahead.
Their backup plan.
What's the backup plan?
And so, if that's the case,
what's the case?
That makes some sense. But the legal case in front of the Supreme Court is definitely sound. And
sure, that's why we're all worried about it. And Biden's gonna accept. What are you about to say in 30 seconds?
As far as we know from the oral arguments, they didn't. To the extent that the Supreme Court was skeptical of the president's authority to do this, it didn't seem centered around the question as to whether it was about the emergency provision.
Yes.
Because if they did that, then somebody could come in and challenge the validity of the 9/11 fund.
Well, sure, but they might still do that anyway on the Supreme Court.
I think they're going to reject it. But on
you think they're going to what?
Oh, bitches.
You think what? You think they're going to reject it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Keep going.
Glad we're on the same page, Sam.
And what grounds they reject it is important.
Is key. But that means that the Biden administration, they might just do a freaking shadow docket and just say, they might not even give that much of an explanation, right?
I think at this point they have to. This is going to be a full, they've given it a full hearing already. So there's going to be there's going to be I think a full decision, and we will tell from that decision on what basis. I would imagine it's going to be, a 6-3 or a 5-4 decision, and a couple of the conservative justices will do it on different on different grounds.
And the pressure will have to be on the Biden administration, especially with a Republican House, to then use the Education Department authority, right?
Right. Well, that.
So
I will get. Don't worry. Don't worry. Do
That's
not
the argument
worry.
from the beginning. I think the idea was
that's why they should have done it, because that's probably like a more legally sound strategy. But I don't really care.
Go back a few seconds. Go back.
Yep.
Go back a few seconds.
Yeah.
Strategy, but I don't really care either. Department authority, right?
Right. Well, that's the argument from the beginning. I think the idea was
that's why they should have done it, because that's probably like a more legally sound strategy. But I don't really care either.
My point.
Stop. So she said
she doesn't care either way, but yes,
she doesn't care either way. But she said they should have used the Higher Education Act as the stronger case.
So they're saying we're right.
Right.
Okay. Just making sure. Just making sure.
He won't fucking stop.
Oh God.
Right.
They're the fucking worst.
But you know what though? In their twisted way,
yeah,
they actually did I don't want to call it good, but they might have done a little bit of good in this, because look, we know our audience. We love you guys, but we know not a lot of y'all are watching us, right?
Yeah.
Majority Report has a huge, much bigger audience than us, so
and much more resources and much more availability, and they could have been there, and
so
they could have done a thing that Anna would ask them to do.
Journalists, ask them the question. Ask them.
Like, you can ask them,
right?
Like,
so
my man here did,
right? But I can argue that they've had Ilhan Omar on the show back in the fall. Not to say that they have direct contact with the squad, but I'm pretty sure they could if they had a chance to kind of clarify this with them, if they really wanted to. Not saying they do, but they had the means to, unlike us. Like, I had to pay money in order to get my question asked, and I got a word salad. So, but all that to say, so they kind of confirmed what I've been saying this whole time, even though they kind of went around a backward way of saying, oh, but the case that they have currently is sound. And even though they kind of said at both sides of their mouth that it doesn't have a chance of passing, but then they alluded to the fact that, oh, Ayana, if this doesn't work, then they could do this. I'm going to debunk that in a second. Okay.
Yeah, but we've got this lady.
Who are these people?
Yeah, we have this lady because Ayana said to me that they said that it couldn't be passed, that this forgiveness could be passed through Congress. And so, just to clarify, it's not a they, it's a she.
Yeah.
This witch.
You assuming her gender?
Was the one. Huh?
Are you assuming her gender?
Whatever.
How dare you?
So this witch said this. So this wasn't a Republican that was saying it cannot. I'm sure there were plenty, but Nancy Pelosi was the one that said that Congress cannot do this
with that big blue D.
Right.
I think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress. And I don't even like to call it forgiveness.
You know, she forgets that she's not holding the glass of bourbon. You know,
it's because that implies
you know what I'm saying? Like,
transgression.
this is,
it's not to be forgiven.
Like this should be the old fashioned. Oh, she just threw it.
Those obligations. The question of who gets forgiven, to use the term of art that is out there, is a debate. Do we use whatever money there is for the broadest base of support of those with more people with even less debt or fewer people with more debt? That's a policy discussion. But the difference between the president can't do it. So that's not even a discussion. Not everybody realizes that, but the president can only postpone, delay, but not forgive.
Objections for fiscal responsibility.
So she said, so Ayanna said they instead of she. And more directly, her former boss.
Yes, Mama Bear herself.
Mama Bear said that this couldn't be done. But, Reef, I told you this.
Yeah.
I have a big receipt for you.
Okay.
And I have a big receipt for
like
the
one
audience.
Of those CVS receipts? Like one of those 80-foot long?
It might as well be. It might as well be.
Tree receipt?
It might as well be, because we're going to debunk what Nancy just said, that, well, partially, because she was kind of misleading in what she was saying here. But we're going to put this to bed once and for all. So, once upon a time, back sometime in 2020, Senator Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter or something to the Legal Service Center of Harvard Law School, basically asking them, so this was when Trump was in office, basically asking them if the president can forgive student debt. This is my made up story, okay? Because at that point we were in the middle of a pandemic. So this was the response. And it's funny, like I found this on Twitter earlier this afternoon. I wasn't necessarily looking for this, but then just sometimes how Twitter can just bless you with some nuggets every once in a while, even for the ooze.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is one of them. Okay. So I'm not gonna read the whole thing given the legalese in this, but I'm gonna pick out the most important things. Okay. Mm-hmm. So this is the response that Senator Warren got back in September 2020. Dear Senator Warren, you have previously proposed that the President of the United States could direct the Secretary of the United States Department of Education, Secretary, to exercise his or her existing authority to cancel federal student loan debt on a broad or categorical basis. So, again, this is not legalese, but I think really this is saying really for any reason is what I'm interpreting this to be. Okay? Mm-hmm. We have consulted with the statutory and regulatory framework governing federal student loan programs administered by the Department of Education, as well as the framework and controlling interpretations of the budgetary structure of these programs. We conclude that such broad or categorical debt cancellation would be a lawful and permissible exercise of the Secretary's authority under existing law. What does that sound like to you, Reef?
That sounds like we can do it. If you do it.
It sounds like you can do it for really any reason.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for an emergency. You can do this whenever.
Look at that right there in Jamaica Plains. You know?
Right. But there's more. Hold on. This is needs to catch up.
Yeah.
By way of background, the power to create debt is generally understood to include the power to cancel it. This power rests in the first instance with Congress. The Constitution gives to Congress the power to dispose of the property of the United States. U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. This means that Congress alone is able to release or otherwise dispose of the rights of property of the federal government, and thus subordinate officers of the United States are without that power, save only as it has been conferred upon them by an act of Congress or is to be implied from other powers. Royal Indemnity Code versus United States and yeah. So this is so I believe this is where the idea of like only Congress can do it came from, which is what Nancy was saying.
Right.
But she was misleading in the sense that Congress can do it because, as this memo says, it says subordinate officers of the United States are without that power to dispose the rights of property of the federal government, save only as it's been conferred upon them. Meaning, that power has to be given to from Congress to those people in order to do it. Again, this is legalese, and I'm not that smart, but that's my interpretation of it. Does that make sense to you, or do you agree with what I just said?
I think so. I mean, it also thinks it could be through whatever act of Congress they can enact it through. I mean, he could do it through the, any of them.
Right.
Pick one.
Right. So, but there's more.
Right.
There's more to this.
Okay.
So, however, so there was a little bit more to this, but however, as relevant to your proposal,
go ahead.
Congress has granted the secretary a more specific and unrestricted authority to create and to cancel or modify debt owed under federal student loan programs in the Higher Education Act itself.
So
that
literally,
provision,
that's like literally written.
Yes.
Like it can do
Yes.
this in this.
Yes.
Okay.
That provision empowers the secretary to execute the broad debt cancellation plan you have proposed. In layman's terms, Cardona can do it for whatever reason he chooses. He doesn't have to wait for a pandemic. He can do it tomorrow.
Right.
And in actuality, it sounds like, and again, I'm not a lawyer, it sounds like he doesn't necessarily need the president or Congress to do it. He could do this on his own accord, just because.
Right.
It could be like, if you owe me money, Reef, and you're like paying it off like month after month or something, I could just tell you whenever, dude, you're good. I don't need the rest of your money. You know?
Right.
This is essentially what this is. He could stop it at any time for whatever reason he chooses. It doesn't have to be because we're in an emergency or whatever. He could just up and decide no one needs to pay their student loans anymore. Done.
Right. So
Right?
it's literally written into the Constitution as of right now.
It is written in the Constitution. And again, like, I'm not a lawyer, but that's
Right.
what it sounds like to me. Right?
Right, which they continue here that
but this
your
is the last
proposal
part.
calls for a lawful and
Yeah.
permissible use of the authority Congress has conferred on the Secretary of Education, which is anticipated and allowed for in the budgetary and accounting treatment of federal student loan programs. It is literally
basically,
written that way.
It was written that way according to these lawyers. Now, these are Harvard lawyers, right?
Right.
So I would think that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I would think.
You
right?
maybe. They might
You
use
would think.
ChatGPT, but
Right. But you would think. But I'm saying that because if Senator Warren has, she went to Harvard and she taught at Harvard. But you would think that the White House doesn't have that same type of access to these lawyers who are able to infer this kind of information, right?
Yeah.
So, and to add to the mess, we know this because I reported upon this
and we know that they know this because this is
And
the
they know
letter
that-
that they put
right.
out.
Which is why I asked Ayanna Pressley that question. Didn't you direct Biden to cancel student loan debt, via the Higher Education Act? And the short answer, if she gave a damn, would have been, yes, I did. And here's the proof.
How hard would have that been?
This is on her website.
So why wouldn't they have?
So I'm going to read it real quick. So Presley, Warren, Schumer colleagues, President Biden can and should cancel $50,000 in federal student loan debt immediately. This was written, this memo.
Just 50,000? Just 50?
Well, up to. Gotcha. Like again, like I would have said at minimum 50. But that's what Warren was proposing. Up to
Schumer, Omar, Maxine Waters.
So Presley, Warren, zoom out a little bit.
Yeah.
And Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, along with Omar, Maxine Waters, Omar Adams, Jamal Bowman, Mondaire Jones, he's gone, and Richie Torres. We know Richie. Led their colleagues in reintroducing the bicameral resolution outlining a bold plan for President Biden to tackle the student loan debt crisis by using existing authority under the Higher Education Act to cancel up to $50,000 in student loan debt for federal student borrowers.
Yeah.
Right? So the short answer to all of this, the word salad that Ayana gave me would have been yes.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Okay. But what happened? Biden sat on his hands for a year and a fucking half. Right?
And now
then in August, he announced that he was going to cancel student debt, but using what at Reef?
The COVID one. That one.
Right.
Which is now over.
Right. So
the Jab
and I
Act.
said this right. So I said this on this show. If he wanted to use the HEROES Act, why in the fuck didn't he do it right when he was sworn in?
Because Collin, he's got to wait and try to use it for re-election.
Right. Right. And Ayana knew that.
And he's going to make you feel the squeeze of it right before then, too. Like he will with Social Security and Medicaid and...
Right. So, two things. Ayana fucking dodged me in not answering the question. Number two, she knew I was right in what I was asking her. And number three, she knew that Biden didn't do it the right way because she signed the memo. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is,
and
he
Jamal
did that
and Omar.
And Jamal, who was sitting right there.
Right.
All knew. So that happened in August of 2020, last August. This was her in September, the following month after.
Okay. September. So, do you remember the 21st night of September where Ayana said this nonsense?
Right.
Mr. Speaker,
so
I
listen
rise
to
this
what
morning
she
in
said.
Solidarity with the millions of student loan borrowers across this nation who slept a little easier last night knowing that essential student loan debt relief is on the way. I'm thinking of every person who's pulled me aside in community, dropped their eyes to the floor as they described the financial burden and shame they were carrying crushed by student debt. The teachers, the electricians, the nurses, and indeed even the grandparents, our elders. Some 76 years old on fixed incomes whose benefits were garnished. The coalition that rallied around our calls to cancel student debt is as broad and diverse as this nation because so too are the families personally impacted by this economic justice issue. President Biden, we thank you for taking action. We thank you for listening deeply and responding. With the stroke of a pen, you moved to cancel student debt for millions of borrowers, and this action is going to change and save lives. In my home state of Massachusetts, the Department of Education.
Except he didn't.
Yeah, except he didn't.
He didn't do it the way he was instructed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And Ayana knew that from that time.
But Collin, you gotta expand the courts. You gotta expand the courts though, Collin.
So this is why I say Democrats are more devious.
Yes.
Because Republicans tell you what they're going, the fuck ups that they're going to do. They tell you. And even like back in April, they were like, we're trying to get rid of the student loan debt thing. You know? So they were saying this in April. So it seems to me how funny that, and just looking, and again, you can look at her website at all the press releases. She mentioned nothing about Biden not doing it the right way. She mentioned nothing regarding, Republicans, sounding the alarm of we're trying to take out the student home loan forgiveness thing.
Yeah.
She said nothing of it until really essentially yesterday.
Right.
What did she do yesterday?
Oh. Do you move it?
Yeah, I'm moving it.
Okay.
There we go. So actually, this is not the one I pulled because Ayana tweeted this out herself. But she filed an amendment to preserve the student loan debt pause. Because as we read in the article, the plan is like the Democrats could say, no, we want to pause it one more time, before the Supreme Court makes the decision. And basically the Republicans are like, fuck no. No more pauses. So yeah, there it is. So this is what Ayana tweeted out today, because she filed for this amendment yesterday, right? Yesterday. Yep. I spoke to her Wednesday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here she says, the pause on student loan payments has been life-changing for families across the country. My amendment would strike down provisions from the McCarthy debt ceiling bill that would force payments to resume on September 1st.
Okay.
Why is this some bullshit?
Well, like, because you could just do it.
You could, right. So given what I read,
just pressure Biden to do it.
Right. Given what I just read in the article, in that memo that Elizabeth Warren got, there's really nothing stopping Biden from signing, or really Cardona for basically saying, I'm just going to cancel student debt just because.
Right.
Nothing stopping him. He has, given what these Harvard lawyers said, and we're going to take them at their word, he has the congressional authority to do it.
Right. So you're trying to put a Band-Aid on a fucking problem that you could just fix.
Right. But more importantly, the issue is now, because because this is the bullshit that Sam and Aaron was saying,
but
they should have tried to do it the right way.
It doesn't mean it happens.
Right. But then they're like, oh, we assume that if it fails, they're going to do it the right way. Why the fuck didn't you do it the right way the first fucking time?
I know, dude. I know.
Why wouldn't you do it the first fucking time, especially if you knew that it had the best chance?
Yeah.
And again, I would go for the HEROES Act, but again, that would have tied, and especially like toward the end of 2021, we were in the middle of Omicron.
Right.
Right? So that would have been more of a reason to get it out then, the end of 2021, right? But instead, you waited till last summer to make that fucking announcement, basically when we're pretty much in the clear of COVID. And I didn't say shit to Biden then, She didn't sound the alarm when Republicans was saying we're trying to kill this thing back last month, 2 months now, and now only because I feel because majority of it got probably a lot more attention than our clips did, that Ayanna was like, oh shit, I better do something to look like I'm actually doing something because this might cost me, my seat.
Right.
If something happens, and it doesn't go through, that could be my damn job.
Yep.
And you know what? In a sense, I'm glad. In a way, I'm glad. But this is the bare fucking minimum that she was able to do. As she knows,
she might not even get it. She might not even get it.
Well, she's not even going to get it now because the Republicans can rule the House.
Right.
So it's too late.
And then they're going to let it be an election thing. So, yeah, I mean, Collin, look, your words are violence, and you should feel shame for committing this violence.
I feel no shame. I feel no fucking shame at all. And actually, it just makes me a little more, it makes me feel a little bit better because, as I said, 1, I didn't want to go. 2, I was scared, to even answer. But I'm glad I did. And I'm glad in particular I asked Ayanna that question because it really just shows how devious
but
the
it responds
Democrats
to
really
pressure.
are.
It responds to pressure, Collin. It responds to pressure.
Well, you know what? It did. It did. But
Yes.
again, but it's not like in the right way.
Look over here, pressure. Just,
Right. But so yeah, I mean, but shout out kind of
our audience,
to Majority Report.
No shout outs. They don't get shout outs.
No,
if our audience wants to send this to Majority Report to let them cover
so
this
do
nonsense, feel free.
So if you want to, because I know a lot of you are watching and a lot of you like the drama. Hell, we like the drama sometimes too, but this is the right drama that I think that should go out. You can clip this and send it and tag Sam and Emma to it. Because we just debunked, and actually they told them themselves because they debunked their own damn selves. They even admitted
y'all know
they should have done it the right way the first time in not so many words. But then Emma was like, "Oh, I don't really fucking care what they do." Well, she didn't say fucking, but like, I don't care what they do. No, you don't, because you're not affected.
Yeah. Well, speaking of people who knew, there was a recent thing with the Grayzone and this interesting lady from the CIA. I mean, the NED. The CIA. So, there was a talk about this today on Jimmy Dore. Max Blumenthal was on. But Alex Rubenstein wrote this up for us to summarize. The Grayzone debates National Endowment for Democracy VP on group CIA ties. Right? And there's Rubenstein and Max over at the Grayzone. Go give them a shout out. They deserve some respect and, But my report detailed the open justification of the terrorist bombing of a cafe in St. Petersburg, which I think Tara covered on our channel. But Russia by a top staffer of Bellingcat, which we've covered their terribleness on this show as well, which receives significant sponsorship from the NED, which functions as the regime change arm of the U.S. government. In the article, I described the NED as a CIA cutout, which clearly disposed on, that's the lady we saw earlier, and prompted her appeal for a call. She gave him a call, Collin. On April 6th, On joined me and Grayzone editor Max Blumenthal for a 40-minute long phone conversation, during which we challenged her on the NED's lengthy history of supporting violent insurrectionists in countries where the U.S. seeks regime change, and on the role of the CIA in founding the NED to openly conduct the work it used to do covertly. You knew this, correct? So here's this call. They managed to record this call. So let's see how she responds.
Thank you so much. So we're just there's been several columns where
There seems to be the implication that National Endowment for Democracy is somehow linked to the CIA or part of the CIA, or I forget what the exact language was. It was like a cutout of the CIA. I'm not really even sure what that means. And I just wanted to reach out and ask you where you guys are getting that, because we're not part of the CIA.
We haven't said that you are a part of the CIA. The term cutout refers to specific remarks that have come from two of your founders, one being Alan Weinstein and the other being Carl Gershman, saying that it would be terrible for democratic groups around the world to be seen as subsidized by the CIA. We saw that in the 60s, and that's why it's been discontinued. We have not had the capability of doing this, and that's why the endowment was created. Similar quotes from Alan Weinstein, who said, a lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA.
Well, the National Endowment for Democracy was founded under the initiative of CIA Director William Casey. He wrote a letter to Reagan's Attorney General Ed Meese on a small working group to make recommendations to the president on the merits of creating a national endowment in support of free institutions throughout the world. And the NED came to being through a compromise between Bill Casey and Bill Proxmire, who was a senator from Wisconsin. I'm not sure if you know about this, but Proxmire had insisted that the NED be completely firewalled from the CIA. And ultimately, the CIA director, Casey, got Proxmire to compromise and reach an understanding that the Senate would essentially approve any U.S. intelligence involvement with the NED. And, at the time, the NED was sponsoring the American Institute for Free Labor Development, which was absolutely a CIA proxy operating under the auspices of the AFL-CIO. And they helped elect a right-wing military thug in Panama. His name.
There we go. White.
It's a right-wing military thug in Panama. His name was Barletta, Nicolas Barletta. He's one of many figures that the NED has helped to bring to power by sponsoring groups that were seeking to overthrow governments the same way that the CIA had done covertly. I can give you many examples if you wish.
I mean, I'd love to have all that history and all that background. I mean, that's not how I understand our history to be, and maybe you know more than I do.
Maybe they know more than she does, who works at the NED.
Mm-hmm.
Collin, help me out here.
I don't think I can then.
Okay. They'd be like, Collin, what do you know about the history of kindergarten, preschool teaching? What do you know about that? What do you know about the history? Well, you might know more than I do, but like what? Huh? Like the history of your school specifically,
Right. I don't even know that. But...
So, to explain why the Grayzone is referred to the NED as a CIA cutout, Blumenthal pointed on to a declassified document showing Ronald Reagan's CIA Director William Casey proposing the creation of a U.S. government-funded national endowment. Okay? The National Endowment for Democracy was born just months after Casey circulated the document to cabinet-level Reagan officials. A cutout, Blumenthal explained during the call, is, quote, an organization spun out as an initiative of that entity and which performs the work or advances that agenda or that entity. Correct? That's his definition he's going with, right?
Okay.
So there's some more of this. We'll see what she has to say about this. I mean, the word of the day is like, is she stupid or does she know? But you know what I mean? Like that's pretty much it. So here you go.
We do not work with the CIA.
Okay.
They don't work with the CIA.
And you're welcome to provide me in a follow-up with and Alex with anything about any concrete provisions that formally restrict the NED from working in any fashion with U.S. intelligence or enabling U.S. intelligence to shape its agenda. To the issue of violence, I pointed you to Leopoldo Lopez, Juan Guaido, and the Venezuelan opposition, which participated in violent Guarimba riots, which left dozens and dozens dead. These figures attacked the Ministry of Justice in Caracas, had the building set aflame. And we can also point to Felix Maradiaga, whose IEEP in Managua, Nicaragua, received hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants from the NED. Maradiaga was filmed inside UNAN, a Nicaraguan university, alongside armed gunmen and thugs associated with criminal gangs as they took over a university and then began to attack the Nicaraguan police. These riots in 2018 between April and July, which I personally covered, I interviewed victims of the violence there, left over 200 dead on both sides, including 18 police officers. Then we have Bellingcat, which receives hundreds of thousands of dollars from the NED. This is a media organization based in the US and UK. And its Russia director, Christo Grozev, as Alex recently reported, went on Sky News to justify the terrorist bombing of a cafe in St. Petersburg, targeting a Russian war journalist, Vladimir Tatarsky. He said that this attack, that Tatarsky was a legitimate target. That's his precise words. And he disputed the idea that the cafe was a civilian target, even though it clearly was. And I just wonder how any of this fits with the NED's mission of supporting peaceful transition when these people are on the record and in the streets participating in violence and justifying it in media.
I mean, we do not support or condone violence. Absolutely not. People have beliefs, and we're just as you do. We support independent media. Sometimes.
No, you don't. We've not gotten any funding from the NED. Like, yeah. The BBC is Bellingcat is independent. Okay.
News media have different beliefs. They may say things that are different from what we say. We are not there to censor them, but we do not, as an institution, condone or support violence. I'm not going to pretend that I know the ins and outs of every single one of these scenarios that you have.
So you have no idea what you do.
For me, I'm not a country expert in those places,
Really?
But I will tell you that NED is not part of the CIA. And we don't support or condone violence. And it's hard for me to think of how I will go back and look at the statute that created us. I'm not sure if there's any specific, I just know how we work and what we do and who I work with every day. And there's no CIA agents around the office. But I will absolutely go and check and see, some of the things that you brought up.
We definitely appreciate that. And we don't appreciate that the CIA might deceive a well-meaning person like yourself by operating undercover as they so often do.
Little sneaky little. Well, I mean, if you're dumb enough to fall for it, yeah.
Who, in your opinion, bullshitted better, Ayana or this chick?
I mean, this lady just pled the fifth pretty much. Ayana could take some just say you don't know. Just say you don't know.
Who bullshitted better?
Just say I don't know. I don't remember. I don't recall. My vision's a little blurry. It's like she's asking for $20 from them to get the story right. He went that way. You know what I mean? Thanks, Kappa. What are we doing?
We do not work with the CIA.
No, you don't work with the CIA at all. No, you would never. Blumenthal and Rubenstein then provided on with a brief history of the NED sponsorship of NGOs, media organizations, and politicians which engaged in violent campaigns to topple democratically elected governments and to undermine officially designated U.S. enemies, from Nicaragua to Venezuela to Ukraine to Hong Kong. Rather than deny her employer's record of regime change machinations, On said she was unaware of it and that she would need to learn more before responding. We asked On to provide concrete evidence, this is Rubenstein and Max, that NED has enacted provisions to prevent it from coordinating its activities with U.S. intelligence, right? So they're not sure that that's happening. They think they're coordinating with them, right? I don't know if it's in the statute. I don't know if it's, I don't know. I'm going to sound like an idiot. I don't mean to sound like an idiot, but you do sound like an idiot on. Replied, like, we also demanded to know whether NED had instituted guidelines which prevented it from funding anti-democratic and violent actors like the coup leaders and political arsonists we detailed. In one particularly revealing exchange on the topic, Blumenthal asked how is it pro-democracy to support mobilizations that seek to remove elected leaders? She replied, isn't that sort of what democracy is? Isn't that what democracy is? To seek to remove elected leaders. No, to vote out and to have democracy, but
right.
Not to like remove leaders you don't like. She fired back in a tactic admission that her organization views foreign meddling and support for violent putschs abroad as an intrinsically democratic act. At a loss for answers, On resorted to a Red Scare style insinuation. I'm just curious. Are you supporters of the Belarusian government?
God.
Of the Ortega government? Of the Chinese government? She asked. I mean, those are all governments that are working, writing, you're supportive of. Like from an editorial perspective?
China.
Just, you know, like, come on, lady. Just,
Don't be rude.
After our call with On, we provided her with our questions in writing, despite repeated promises over the phone and in follow-up emails to furnish the information we requested. The NED has not done so for over 50 days since we first engaged with On. Like, that's a month and change. I think that's a pretty good follow-up time. Mm-hmm. You know? So, between April 11th and May 5th, On sent 3 emails promising a response. She then went cold, prompting our decision to publish a recording of our phone conversation. We will update this article if On chooses to reply to our questions.
That's a no.
Do you think that's going to happen?
Nope.
No, that's a lot of damage.
Like Grayzone guys, you're killing it. Great job on that. Y'all got gifted that little fucking amazing little treat y'all got. So, but yeah, we're gonna try to reach out to at least Rubenstein, see if she's gotten a response and you know what he thinks of that. But anyway, that's it for this week.
Yeah.
So, you know,
kind of a hard week, but yeah, we got through it. So yeah, as we said, those of you who are new or came in a little later, Misty's resurrecting bitch on Saturday. Time to be determined as soon as she confirms that.
Cindy's
with
in
us.
chat and knows the time. Feel free to tell us.
All right. So if you know, so yeah, either way, you can check the time on our Twitter page at Getting the News, and we'll let you know. So that's on Saturday. Sunday, Indy and Reef will return. They took last Sunday off.
Memorial Day Sunday off, yeah.
Memorial Day, and Indy gives some Indy time to spend with his kids. So that will be returning on Sunday night at 10 Eastern. Monday night, this Monday night, Crab and Chris had Jose Vega on to talk about his expulsion, I would say, from entering any squad, AOC funded event.
So 9:30 or 10 on Misty.
Okay. We'll get information on that later.
Tomorrow, I'll be on Savvy Sabs talking about Tara Reid's situation. That'll be at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, and so Crab said that Lucy is going to be on Hardlands tomorrow. That will be more likely at 10 Eastern, 9 Central. So if that's early for you guys, it would be for me. You can definitely check the clips afterward, but definitely support Lucy. Crab and Chris for Alternate Angle Monday nights at 10. And we'll be back here next week.
Yep.
Unless something happens at 9.
Is that it?
p.m. I think that's it.
I think that's it. Critical Thinking is asking if I'm a libertarian, as how I normally tell people at the end of any show who might want to know what labels me or Collin are. Labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.